Welcome to the digital airwaves of Stereophonic. I'm Dan Kimpel. With this ongoing conversation series, we present the people, personalities, and perspectives of the modern music business through conversations with those in the spotlight and behind the scenes. It is our objective to entertain and inform you as we reveal tips and tales from deep inside the music industry. Her epic songs are a soundtrack for generations. Songwriter, musician, and producer Holly Knight penned career-defining hits for artists including Tina Turner, Pat Benatar, Heart, Aerosmith, Bon Jovi, Scandal, and so many others. As an inductee into the Songwriters Hall of Fame, her artistry continues to resonate wherever music is heard. Tales of the times, sex, drugs, and rock and roll are definitively and defiantly shared in her book, I Am the Warrior, My Crazy Life Writing the Hits and Rocking the MTV 80s. She is brilliant, bold, and badass. We're honored to be in the presence of rock songwriting royalty as Stereophonic presents Holly Knight. Holly, so great to be here in your studio.
This is where it all happens.
I hope we don't get an earthquake because we would all die under the deluge of platinum discs falling off the walls. But you're right. It's great to come out here and sort of see where the magic as it is happens.
Can you feel it? Can you feel the mojo in the room at all?
I definitely feel you in the room, and I do feel the mojo in the room. I actually read your book before we had even planned to do the interview. Because
No kidding.
Oh yeah, because I saw this book was coming out, and I'm fascinated by what you had to say as an author. So that happened. I actually paid retail for it.
I'm sorry.
on Kindle, but it's really great. I understand from my friend Rhea Joe that the audio version of the book is incredible because it's your voice doing the book. And
Yeah.
she said, "Oh, you got to hear that." So with all of that energy. A 4-minute song and a many-chaptered book would seem to be different creative endeavors. How is it similar to writing songs, writing a book, or how is it different?
On the one hand, it was easier because it's very linear. It's just telling a story. I never sort of sat down there twiddling my thumbs. It was just gushing out of me, and I kept making typos and having to go back and fix it because it was just pouring out of me. Whereas with a song, there's the music and then there's the lyrics. So there's more that has to be written and they have to work together. So in that way, it was easier. In other ways, I just sort of purely went by instinct. I didn't take a writing course or anything like that. First, I kind of put it all out there, and actually I had 100 pages more. Then when I got an editor, he said, well, let's really narrow it down and focus on this. And what it was the MTV years from 1980 to 1990, which was just an explosive time for me, where my career took off. And it was just such a fun time that I wanted to recapture that, I wrote too much and then I whittled it away, which is a high-class problem, to have too much instead of sitting there going, what do they want to know, In the beginning, I didn't think they'd want to know anything. I wasn't even going to write a book. But
Really?
yeah.
What was the process? Did you write every day? Did you have a schedule for it? Or how did it work?
I don't really write by schedules. I'm good with lists. Like, I'll make a to-do list, but there's no schedule to, like, at this hour, I'm going to stop by this time and then go out to dinner. These are my goals and they need to be met. Sometimes there are deadlines, which actually I work really well under pressure. So, because I know I have to deliver and it just makes me go, this is going to have to make it through, whatever I'm working on. Or if it's not making it through, I have to just keep whittling away, until I get to where I want. It's usually lyrically, that's where a lot of the finessing comes. The music's easy. Yeah. And sometimes the lyrics are easy, but other times, it's really important to get it right and not write things you're going to be embarrassed about years later, Or if you write something that sounds kind of dumb, which was a lot of fun when I was writing rock, to sort of dumb it down sometimes. And not dumb it down like the people singing them were dumb, but just to simplify the melodies and the words and let each word have some weight, if I was writing sort of anthemic stuff. But always very important to write lyrics that are either sophisticated or artistic or, like I said, dumb. Like Obsession, you know?
your decisions to be so honest in the book. That's what really struck me is sometimes people will allude to things. You just like lay it out. And it's wonderfully refreshing and really entertaining.
Thank you. Yeah, it's sort of like even lyrically, I like to keep things real. When I read a story, I really want to know the real story, you know. I don't like it when it's diluted. For instance, there was a Broadway musical, Janis Joplin, and I hated the fact that they never once mentioned she was an addict. You know, she was using heroin, and I think that in a sad way really contributed to what was so wonderful about her art, you know. And I hated that they just sort of took out all the parts that made her what she was.
In the book, you say not everyone who snorted coke is an addict and not everyone who enjoys wine is an alcoholic. And I thought that was a really important point to make. You know, about certain times. There were things in certain times that were there.
Right, and I admitted to it, but I also said it wasn't a problem. And it's not me being sort of self-delusional. I just sort of did it at a modicum level compared to some of the other people that were doing much harder drugs or drinking like, you know, a couple of liters of vodka a night. That's not me. I can barely make it through a martini. But I've often found that, you know, even smoking pot is a lot more safe for me than, say, drinking and getting drunk.
As we were putting together plans to interview you, we were struck with the huge loss of Tina Turner. And as soon as I heard that, my first thought was of you, because the songs that you wrote for Tina Turner, the songs that she recorded of yours, were just such definitive songs of Tina, and she embraced all of the spirit of those songs. And it reminded me something you said in the book, which is about Tina and about you, and about a lot of people we know, which survivors have the best stories, you know.
Yeah, a lot of interviewers have picked up on that one line, and I think it's true, and I think it's the same in movies and TV. If you don't have that story to tell, it seems like people are like, oh, you had it so easy. Like, I can't relate to that. I can't even pay my bills, you know?
But Tina, the way she could impart a thought and a song to just like hot. She recorded songs that had been recorded previously, which is interesting.
In the beginning, yes.
Yeah, in the beginning.
Well, actually, even in the end.
Interesting.
If you think about the best. I've written lots of songs for her.
Yes.
But she's always been able to make them her own. And I think that's sort of that old school approach of coming from a different era where so many people would record the same song and they waited till someone had a hit with it, or they'd just do another version of it, you know, and she comes from that. So she wasn't a songwriter, although she probably was and didn't get credit for it, but she had something to do with Nat Bush City Limits. And so that lends me to think that maybe she was a writer. Maybe she wasn't encouraged and she was pushed down in that way. And then after a while, people were just giving her songs. And so she didn't bother. I never really talked to her about it, but she was brilliant in copying every little nuance on the demos, much more so than any other artist that I've worked with. And if you were to listen to the Spider version of Better Be Good to Me, because I actually wrote it for my band on the second record, and that was going to be our single. And then something weird happened in the music business, which I talk about, which totally derailed it. And so it wasn't even released as a single. So when Tina heard it, the urban legend is she just jumped up and ran around the room in this A&R meeting and started singing the song to the people sitting at this big board table and said, I want to cut this. You know, it was a woman being strong and saying, I want to be treated right. And that was very much what was going on in her own life. And from that point on, I really always tried to get inside her head to what she wanted to sing. Like, I knew she didn't want to sing the blues. I knew she was a rock chick, and I was her rock chick. So that's where we met, because she had other people like Terry Britton writing, you know, this other beautiful pop side of things, like, you know, What's Love Got to Do with It, or We Don't Need Another Hero. When she did the video to One of the Living, which was the opening track for the Mad Max movie that she starred in, she was holding an electric guitar and playing it in her video, and she'd never done that before or since. I think that's the only time I've ever seen her actually playing an electric guitar.
You're from New York. We can hear a little bit of that. You studied classical.
Go ahead. Go ahead. You said that in the book instead of go ahead. And I didn't realize that till someone pointed it out to me. So my son's girlfriend, she said, "It's so cute, your New York accent." I said, "I don't really have one. I'm from Manhattan." She goes, "Yeah, but you say gad."
You were studying classical music, and at the same time, you were down at the Fillmore East listening to the devil rock and roll music. Did you see women rockers? Were women rocking out at that time?
Very, very, very few. I mean, this was like, and if they were, most of the time, and that's not much different today, most of the time they were the singers. You didn't see female musicians like playing drums, or, of course, there was the Wrecking Crew, Carol Kay.
Yeah.
She was amazing.
She's badass. You're a player. You went to Boston. You studied electronic music production. That was pretty early on in electronic music.
Very early on. It just was kind of the new sound. There were bands like The Who, kind of on Out Here in the Fields. What's the name of it, though? Teenage Wasteland. We said it both at the same time. But remember, there was sort of like that sort of electronic sequencer going in the background. And then there was Emerson, Lake and Palmer. They really embraced that, and like Yes, groups like Yes. And then it went into more of an electronic form of, sorry, this is my history lesson.
It's fine.
Kraftwerk, and Trans-Europe Express and Tangerine Dream. And I was sort of fascinated with all that. And then there was even Walter Carlos, who became Wendy Carlos, one of the very first people to come out and transgender, which was amazing. He went from Walter to Wendy, but his whatever genre he was, his music was brilliant. He did Switched on Bach, and he did a lot of the Stanley Kubrick movies, Clockwork Orange, and he took Beethoven and just made it all electronic. And I ate stuff like that up. I was a real sort of muso geek in one respect, You
talk about a tempestuous home life when you were growing up, and one of the things that you said was how common maternal abuse was amongst creative women back then. Why do you think that was?
I don't know. I just know that there's something when I think of, my friend Cassandra Peterson, who wrote about her mother, and just about every creative woman I know. So I didn't want to sort of write about my experience like, oh yeah, we've heard all that. I mean, Carole King had a mother she had to contend with too. So I don't know to what extent with her, but you could be one of two things. You can carry on the next generation of this sort of behavior that goes on in families. Sort of if someone was alcoholic, then you can carry on and be an alcoholic. Or if someone's violent, you could carry on and be violent. Or you could say, I'm not going to be that person. I'm going to be the exact opposite. I'm going to be such an aware, loving parent. Or I'm going to be such a healthy person, So you can go one of two ways. And I went in the direction of, I'm going to have my own voice. And I'm going to write songs about empowerment. Because I was under my mom's thumb for so long that in a way it was a gift, And maybe that's the simpatico I have with these other women, because they're all actually very successful, very creative, as I said in the book. And some of them I think are more forgiving than I was. For a long time I carried this angst in me. And I think it was only when I wrote the book that I finally let go and forgave and tried to understand the other side of my mother's issues,
You also observed that love and creativity contain the same energy, which I think is an interesting thought. So.
Well, you know how you feel blissed out, like when you fall in love, you're all gooey and you're so happy, and it's like there are Disney like little birds flying around your head, and everything is just so loving. You actually start to feel good about yourself. So when I write a great song, and I know it's a great song, and I think, I am so grateful I came up with that, because it's gratitude, It's sort of like that same feeling, like you feel so good about yourself, And then other people feel good when they hear the song, so then again, it's more love, So that's kind of what I meant.
You departed from New York with Dan.
My first Dan.
Yes, you disappeared across the country, which is probably another book. You returned to New York City. When you came back, the mid to late 70s, New York, it's so interesting how that period is mythologized. I mean, on some levels, it was a very scary time in New York. It was, the blackout in 77, the Son of Sam in the boroughs, a lot of weird things economically in that city. But it seemed on fire creatively. I mean, there were so many different scenes going on. Disco was doing its thing. Punk on the Bowery was doing its thing. You know, you talk about Tracks on 72nd Street, Jimmy Poland's other club on 76th. JP's was also like a hotbed of it.
I hung out at all those places because I lived like within blocks at that time too.
And you talk about CBGB and Great Gildersleeves where you played. And at that time you were playing in the band, originally called Siren and then Spider, and you were playing the Hammond B3 and carrying the Hammond B3, which you tell a fabulous story about it sliding down a flight of stairs.
5 flights of stairs.
5 flights of stairs. Oh my God.
Straight down. No landings, no turning around. Just like a toboggan. It turned into a toboggan and smashed into the door at the bottom of the loft.
If anybody's ever carried a Hammond B3, you might even sympathize on that.
We didn't even address it, though. We were so tired. It was like 4:30 in the morning. We'd come back from a gig. We just looked at it and then shrugged and went to bed. And it was only the next day that I realized that's it. It's seen its best days. It's Kindlewood now.
We know that you went to the Farfisa at one point.
Yeah.
The Farfisa organ.
Yeah.
The compact or the
No, it was a sort of big monster, and I covered it in what was it, like red cherry vinyl, made it my own.
Beautiful. One of our interviews recently for our season was with Evan Bogart, who was a producer on a film about his father, Neil Bogart, president of Casablanca Records. And I know that you were in that world, obviously, with Kiss was signed to Casablanca Records. And presented in the movie and presented in a really interesting way as Bill Aucoin. And people have referred to him to me as a marketing genius, Bill Aucoin.
He was a marketing genius. He was an ad man. He did marketing before he went into the music business to start managing bands. And he took that savvy that he had learned and put it into the bands. It was very smart. I mean, it was like, obviously, I wouldn't say they're the first because we had the Beatles and we had Beatles lunchboxes and Beatle boots and all that stuff, but they really learned how to capitalize on it. The Kiss market, their merchandising was just, merchandising on steroids, if you will, compared to the Beatles. To this day, if you look behind you, there's actually a vault, and it's a Gene Simmons vault that he sent me a few years ago for his last endeavor. It's got an action figure of Gene Simmons, not as the demon, but as himself, and other little assorted goodies, and a 20 CD set of demos. Anyway, we played on one of the demos, and so when he was putting it together, he asked me if I would mind him using it, which I thought was really nice. It was his demos. He could do whatever he wanted. So he put it on there and then sent me this giant vault.
Something you talk about in your book is also in the film Spinning Gold. It's when Neil Bogart realizes the power of Kiss is when he sees a little kid dressed up. And you mentioned that Kiss really embraced the Kiss Army.
Oh, yeah.
And it was all about the fans.
They're doing it more than ever now.
So interesting. Yeah. And Kiss, of course, very famously never used any keyboards on their records until you.
Until me.
Yes,
yeah.
The mystery keyboard player for Kiss.
I don't know since then if they ever did either.
Yeah, and that was a one take, as you say in the book. You thought you were warming up and learning the song, but it was the first take.
It was the only take, the first and only take. They said, "That's good. We're done. Can you stay? We decided we want you to play on the whole record." So I went, "Okay." Like I starry-eyed looked at him and like, "Sure." I'm saying, I can't wait to get back and tell the band I played on the whole Kiss record because they'd already used Anton to play the drums.
Yeah.
And I explained how that all came to be in the book. And, Kiss is part of my coming-of-age story, really. That's why I spent a lot of time on them. And, each chapter in the book addresses a different song and a different part of that era, which was so saturated with the influence of MTV, which is why I got all the original VJs to, write these little blurbs about me, which was incredible because it sort of validated what I was saying and not that I was making it up, Yeah.
Yeah, for our listeners, she just referenced Anton Fig.
Yes, sorry.
The fabulous drummer who's ridiculous resume includes everything from Bob Dylan to Josh Groban, and just an incredible drummer. And as you say in the book, he was playing sessions, and so he sometimes, he was able to help fund some of the band's endeavors.
Exactly. He was the drummer also in Spider.
Yes, and what an amazing player.
We were wee little babes at that time. Neither one of us had really done much of anything, and it all started with Spider, and it was sort of happening for him around that time because he was playing with artists like Robert Gordon and people like that.
Yeah. Rob Stoner,
Link Ray.
Wyeth are people that were around those scenes in those times.
Yes.
And
in fact, Link Ray was the first person that ever cut a song of mine, but I don't know where I can't find a copy. I don't know if he actually ever put it out or if he just recorded it, but that was the very first, outside of the band, of course.
Yes. Link Ray, Rumble.
Didn't he get inducted this year, or was it last year?
I think he did, yeah. You met Mike Chapman, and you tell the story about how that happened. You were introduced to Mike, and you didn't realize that was Mike Chapman at the time, and then you connected with Mike Chapman, and obviously very famously signed the band and encouraged you, when you left the band, to move to Los Angeles and pursue that songwriting edge.
Yes.
Boy, was that a good move.
I know. I mean, he really was my mentor, and in so many ways, he was sort of my soulmate as far as writing. When I look back now, after a 40-year career, of all the different people I've written with, and I very much voice that in the book, how lucky I was to have a mentor, and not everybody gets that. So I'm sort of doing that now with a couple of artists. I mean, I've always worked with young, interesting artists, but it seems more like I'm passing on a lot more now than back then, when I was younger. Yeah. Great.
Well, at the time you came to Los Angeles, Les Dômes, you talk about that in the book. that was kind of a scene.
Did you ever go to the scene in Les Dômes?
I went to Les Dômes for lunch.
I don't know your age, so.
Well, I'm a very young man, but 8730 Sunset Boulevard, I remember the address, and BMI was in the upstairs in that building.
Was too.
That's right. Yeah, so
I used to work, they built a studio, and I used to do a lot of my demos there. Yeah. But at that point, Les Dômes was kind of over. It was just nice. It became like a nice, tame sort of restaurant compared to the Sodom and Gomorrah days.
As we talk in the book, on August 1st, 1981, your career took an amazing technological turn with the advent of MTV. And they bowed with "Video Killed the Radio Star," and it certainly did. It made the careers of certain artists, and it destroyed the careers of certain artists. But fortunately for you, the artists who recorded your songs were camera ready. And so it was an amazing time.
Right, but it was also a golden age of bands and rock. I mean, now you don't really see very many bands in the forefront. I mean, as far as being commercially at the front of the game and being commercially successful and being on the charts, there's still obviously the rock genre, but it's become very sort of segregated. Yeah. Whereas before it was a combination of that with pop that was the music of that time. And it had a lot of room for all kinds of different genres, too. It became a melting pot, whether it was Def Leppard or Michael Jackson, sure. And everything in between, whether it was Huey Lewis and Duran Duran. And it was wonderful for women because the women I worked with were all pretty hot. And so, like in the videos, they could use not only their great talents, but their beauty with, the wonderful world of film and video and special effects and makeup artists and stylists. And there were so many times that the video directors got it so wrong. And for some reason, it seemed to be that way with a lot of my songs. But looking back, it was what made it so quintessentially 80s. I mean, for instance, the video to Love is a Battlefield, and that scene in the bar where, she's supposed to be a hooker and she's dancing and all that was really not what I had in mind when I wrote it. But now when people see it, it's just like, would you miss any of that? Yeah. And I had my own videos too. I had my band Device, and we had a video, Hanging on a Heart Attack, which is more popular now than it ever was then. We have like 500,000 followers on that song now. And so I'm going to re-record it. I'm going to do a new version. But I look at the way I was dressed in my videos and the shoulder pads. the hair extensions, and I look back at it now like, what was I thinking? But, it was 80s. I was very much into sort of like English music. I spent a lot of time in London. And so I liked all that crazy hair extensions. And so when I talk about it in the book, when I went in for the first time to see Heart, they were sort of braiding my hair and as they were talking to me and saying, cool hair, like, what's up with that? And I said, well, they're extensions. And then they started doing it. And then a lot of other people started doing it,
Fashion of the times.
Oh, yes.
There's something about your songs, they're huge. They're just almost operatic in certain ways. And I think maybe part of that could be your classical background where you have the confidence to do that. Sometimes the ranges of the artists were huge ranges, But I think about just the intensity. As I've been listening to you nonstop for like 2 weeks. So I've just been listening to all your songs like every day for like a lot of time. So
so you've been to a lot of grocery stores?
The listening platform, which we will not speak its name, it enabled me to put together compilations of things and listen. And there are pre-existent compilations, collections of your songs out on certain listening platforms, and so right. I could listen and vibe. But that operatic thing, just like there's songs that are intimate and soft. You don't write those songs,
Yeah,
I'm sure you can, but I mean, I tend to think of your hits as
because you want to remember the feeling of that time. That's what I tried to do with this book is put people in the room. And just sort of imagine, when you were a little younger, you were the kid that sort of had the. What is it? Not the mohawk. What was the haircut? Short on top. Mullet. The mullet. Okay, so I had the shoulder pads, and there was the mullet for the guys, and the eyeliner, and
Yes.
I remember all that very fondly. What's changed a lot is the clothing has become much more sort of designer and made by professionals and a team of stylists and makeup artists. And what happened, it was a very slow climb, but once MTV became sort of a visual entity that just changed pop culture, people just got carried away with the videos where everything had to be choreographed. I mean, now the pressure to not only sound good but look good, I just think is not always like realistically the best message,
Yeah, I agree. We'll be right back. This season of Stereophonic is sponsored by Isotope, makers of innovative audio products that inspire and enable people to be creative. Visit isotope.com to learn about award-winning audio plugins and use the code STORY10 to get an extra 10% off. We are also sponsored by Odyssey. Trusted by professionals all over the world, Odyssey is uncompromised audio. Visit Odyssey.com. I've had songwriters talk to me about the feeling that they are channeling something which is pre-existent. In the book, you talk about songwriting as a Ouija board. The things start as abstract. Do you think songs are pre-existent? Do you think they're out there in the universe somewhere and you channel them?
No, because absolutely not. Because I've heard a lot of people say, it just came through me, the song wrote itself. I think the magic is that it's a partnership. It's a partnership with who you are spiritually. You are sort of tapping into sort of some dimension that is a different level of sort of thinking and feeling and expressing yourself. If you've been playing music for a long time, I had been playing since I was 4. So I feel like I bring something, and it's like whether it's what's in my DNA and all the stuff I went through, my history, everything, it's all part of the sort of magical soup that makes a song, But you definitely have to tap into the ether. I'm probably more in the moment then than any other time.
There's an era of rock music which is very interesting to me because I've heard it from a number of different sources who were around it at that time and what was happening. I've heard the story from Ann and Nancy Wilson. I've heard it from Don Grierson, who is a mentor of mine. And it had to do with the moment when bands were really big, like Heart or Bon Jovi, and they were so busy touring that they didn't really have the time to write songs. And so at that point, professional songwriters were enlisted. And sometimes the bands, as they've said to me, were very resistant to that at first. But fortunately, they listened. And Heart is definitely one of those bands. And you very successfully worked with the band Heart. Now, I think of Heart, obviously, having interviewed them, I mean, so the sisterhood there, so you've got that dynamic. You got the dynamic of a self-contained band. But yet, you're an outsider, but you were able to get inside with that. What was the secret?
That was kind of a special moment for me. It didn't happen with every single female artist I worked with. But with the girls from Heart, they're just so down to earth, and they were kind of naughty like me. I always thought they were like going to be these sort of prim and proper women, but they could party just as hard as men or me or whatever, and I loved that. Then of course we all ended up having families and children and stopped all that nonsense. But it seemed appropriate at that time in the 80s and our age and everything. It was fun. It was
just interesting when those elements came in with the outside writers.
Yeah, I didn't have that with everybody. I didn't have that with Pat Benatar. She was very much married to her guitarist producer and didn't really allow for time to bond, Yeah.
Tall, Dark, Handsome Stranger on my playlist. I like that. That's wonderful.
That should have been a single.
Yeah.
Because it was a bit of an homage to ZZ Top when I started the song. But I wrote that with Albert Hammond, and we gave it to them. And her vocal on that is just off the charts, Yeah, I love that song. I wish that would have been a single over maybe one of the other ones that they released of mine.
Yeah.
So thank you for saying that.
Oh, I loved it. And Albert Hammond, very classy gentleman.
He's very European.
Very European.
He's got that sort of English accent that's European from Rock of Gibraltar, sort of. And he's very old school.
Yes.
Because he's a little bit older.
And for our young listeners, we are referring to Albert Hammond Sr., not Albert Hammond Jr. from the Strokes.
Right, exactly.
Talking about producers, there's been so many different kinds of producers, writer producers, producers, etc., and you've worked with many of them. You make the observation in the book, whoever's producing the song is more likely to make some changes. Sometimes the only reason to change things is because they can. And I thought that was an interesting observation about production. I've interviewed women songwriters who provide vocal production to songs that they have written, but sometimes they don't get proper credit for producer. Why do we have so few women producers in our business?
Because it's still a patriarchal sort of society that we live in, and it's run by men. And this is such a long conversation to have. It depends on which era you pick. So if you're saying, why are there more male guitarists than women? I could give you my theory on that. But when you produce, you're in charge. You're kind of like the ringleader. And so I think one of the things I bring to the table is what Mike Chapman did, which is I have writing skills. And I think that really good producers have the ability to rearrange or change or make the song better, while still honoring what is great about whoever wrote the song. And I think the idea of handing money over to a woman saying, okay, you can do whatever you want and you're in charge, they get nervous with that, which to this day, I don't understand that, because really, I don't know, I kind of look at it like that phrase, behind every great woman is herself,
Ooh.
I've done vocals and I've done them on a demo, and I've had a producer ask me to send the tracks over, and the excuse is so he can just see like what went into it so he can recreate it. And then they end up using the exact track that I sent. This has happened several times, and I know it for a fact because I comped them, meaning I took several different takes to combine them into one sort of, smooth sounding vocal where the singer wasn't capable of singing it that way on their own. And so I knew that that was sort of my collaboration with them as a producer. And then they had to give me credit on it. I don't know why that is. I mean, there's some good ones. I mean, Missy Elliott is such a great producer. Why is there no all-women's virtuoso band? I've just put together a band like that I'm producing.
Ooh.
And I play the keyboards on it, but I'm not going to tour with them. But they're called The Terrible Truth. I'm working on the EP with them. The musicians, it's all completely self-contained with the female entity, you know. But they're really good players. They're not even adequate. They're like the guitarist is from Munich. She's a Steve Vai protege. The lead singer is Lena Hall, who's Tony-winning singer, performer, actress. She was on Snowpiercer. Women drummer, bass player. Just because it's never been done. I mean, we've had some very commercially successful bands like the Go-Go's.
Mm-hmm. I love that you're in the Rock Songwriters Hall of Fame. I think that is so cool. And you talk about that in the book, and it's a beautiful moment when you describe, I mean, because like there were like just ridiculous songwriters being honored that year.
I know, right? Steven Tyler and Joe Perry and Lou Gramm and Mick Jones and Bernie Taupin had already been inducted, but he was getting another award with them. And I'd worked with all of them, so it was sort of like a rock and roll high school reunion. I hadn't seen a lot of them for 20 years.
I love your Rod Stewart stories in your book.
Did.
And so readers, you'll have to like read them for yourself because I'm not going to tell them here. But Rod certainly lives up to his rakish reputation. You know, it was very fun to read. You're a Libra with Scorpio rising, and you were born in the year of the monkey. My Libra friends tend to have a tendency, once they establish a thought, usually about people, their judgment is pretty unshakable. So,
yeah, we're judgmental. My kids say I'm judgmental. I am. I'm a bit of a snot. I mean, I have to admit that. But when I really believe in something, I will go to the ends of the earth to help and push that person on. But at the same time, I want to say, you know, I dedicated the book to anyone who's ever had a dream and was told no. It was amazing because I was watching the news this morning and they showed the mother-daughter duo that had gone up in the Richard Branson space flight yesterday, the last 2 days. And she was saying the same thing. You know, they come from, I think it's Jamaica or the Caribbean. And it was just a beautiful thing to see them. They were so spiritual. And she said, if anybody had ever told me, she talked about the whole thing about having your best dreams and don't ever let anybody dissuade you from that, you know. So, yes, I'm tying it back to where did this come from? It's like, you know, if you have a dream, just go for it, you know. And even though I said I was a bit of a snot before, when it comes to music, that's because I've been playing since I was 4, and I listen and still play classical, and I am opinionated. That's the problem when you're in your own career and someone asks you an opinion. I usually say, take it with a grain of salt, because I'm really, you know, I'm kind of picky about what I like or don't like.
When I was researching this interview for today, I had to go back into my own computer and see moments when I have written about you in the past. And as I mentioned, I had prepped an interview for you one time that didn't happen for the ASCAP Film and TV Awards.
Right.
Here
comes the question.
No, this is easy. I wrote about you because you were doing a master class at one time. I put that in my column.
You mean teaching a master?
You were teaching a master class. You were taking it.
Right. Well, I
think you did. But you were teaching a master class. Tell us about how do you do that?
Well, I sat down and wrote a syllabus about what I thought were the things that need to be taught the most to writers, and what, if I was starting out, what I would want to know or what would be the most helpful. And you know, I mean, I think anybody, it's not like we all have to do this for a living. You could take a master class because you think, oh, it makes me feel good to play music and sing, and so you could do it, you know. So when you say master class, it's like there's different levels of them. Usually if it's someone that's super talented at that point, I'm working with them and I'm almost sort of doing a master class as we're going, you know, like Songwriter 101. But I love to teach, I really do. I don't love to teach when the person's sort of on their phone. It's like, go away in the car. I really want the people that are engaged and passionate about, and they sort of have that doe-eyed look when they look at me, and they're respectful, and it just really puts me back in that time when I was with Mike Chapman and starting out, and I was just like a sponge, and everything he said, it's like he had actually done it. They talk about influencers today. I like people that actually accomplish these things, and then I like to listen to what they have to say, because they've been to the mountain, and they've done it more than once, many times over. There must be something that they can teach me or know. I will say that one of the most important things I think that someone has to grasp very quickly in the beginning of songwriting are arrangements. And what I mean by that is, what is a verse? What do you do in a verse? What's a chorus? What's the point of the chorus? Does it need a pre-chorus? Does it need a bridge? And if it needs a bridge, what is the purpose? Why would you put a bridge in there? I always call the bridge sort of like, and furthermore, verse sets the stage, the chorus is what it's about. And if people don't know it's a chorus, that means you didn't write one.
Yeah. And you had to rewrite a song, a very famous song, and add a bridge and a modulation.
Correct.
Yes.
And it's the biggest song I ever wrote.
Yes. Been used. Tell them the title.
Oh, it's called The Best. A lot of people, they look blankly at me because I say the best, and they're thinking of simply the best, but it's really the best.
The best, yeah.
Yeah. And, first I wrote it with Mike Chapman for another artist who passed on it, and I actually thanked that person in the book for not recording it in the acknowledgments. And then Bonnie Tyler recorded it. Desmond, who we were talking about before, Desmond produced it. Didn't really do anything. I don't even know if it was released as a single, but it was mostly in Europe. And then Tina heard this song, and she fell in love with it, and she called me up and she said, I want to cut this song, but I need you to write a bridge. And then I want the key to go up at the end, Sort of like someone calling up their couture designer and saying, I want a sash, and then I want it to be bare on the shoulders, and I want it to float like a mermaid thing. So it's like, okay, I can do that. And she was so dead on right, though. I mean, it made the song get to another level. I mean, she didn't write it with me, but her instinct was dead on. And that's why I love the fact that she trusted me enough that she never changed anything when I gave her demos. She out of all the people I worked for, she respected what was on the demos. And a lot of times, sonically, it was like, sounded like crap, or what we purposely didn't pick killer singers. Like Mike would often sing on the demo because he had the attitude, because we knew they would take it to the next place. So I think that's a mistake when people make demos and they think, okay, I'm going to back in the 80s, I'm going to pick the song, I'm going to write a song for Pat Benatar, so I've got to find a singer that sounds just like her. That's like the worst thing you can do. For rock singers and females, I would always get a guy to sing it.
Yeah. I've heard that from country writers as well.
Really? Yeah. It makes total sense.
What I love about the book is when you think, oh, shit, I'm almost at the end of the book, then there's a little more. One of the things that I really enjoyed was songs you wish you had written. So included in that list are Hallelujah, yes, Satisfaction, Walk on the Wild Side. The real oddball song in that list is Hey There, Little Red Riding Hood, recorded by Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs, written by Ronald Blackwell, whose brother was Dwayne Blackwell, a very famous country writer.
That I did not know.
Isn't that trippy? They had a group
trippy
in Hollywood that they sang called the Blackwells. Well, I fell in this hole. This is.
You went down the rabbit hole.
This is the rabbit hole.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
See, I didn't know that part.
Yeah, Dwayne Blackwell, his brother, wrote I've Got Friends in Low Places for Garth Brooks. But anyhow, Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs, Hey There, Little Red Riding Hood. Amazing.
You sure are looking good. You're everything that a big bad wolf would want. I love wolves. I have a thing about wolves. I have since. I mean, you saw a picture of my dog.
Your dog, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of DNA there.
There was a little thing I said at the beginning of the book, which I love. You can't feed me to the wolves. They come when I call. And I just love it because it's sort of like, that's who I am. And that's how I survived, sort of navigating through such a male-dominated industry and even a male-dominated world. And it's not just the music business. This is just the way things still are. I don't know how far we've gone. In some ways we have, in other ways we've gone backwards.
But we do go on.
We go on either way, yes.
And as I read your book and listen to your songs, you're at the peak of your powers, and it's such a joy to have you as our guest
Thank
on
you.
Stereophonic. Thank you for listening to Stereophonic. Please follow us and rate us on your favorite listening platforms. Tune in for new shows and check out past episodes. Stereophonic is produced and mixed by Lindsay Tomasic. Our production director is Kim Strand. Our theme music is by Dadalite Mine. And I'm your host, Dan Kimbell.